Hello everyone and welcome back to the OGT practice test. We're going to work again on the test 2009. And if this is your first visit with the practice test, I'm going to let you know that I'll probably skip some of the questions. I'm going to go over the ones that I feel like are the most pertinent. And I know these aren't super exciting, but I'm doing my best to keep my voice exciting. I'm not sure what else to do. All right, we're going to get started with this question. The thing that I want you to notice right away whenever you look at these questions is how simple the charts and diagrams are. And when you are doing these questions, the best thing you can do, and this is a great example of this, is to understand that chart. Notice anything that, pay attention to what's different about the chart, what might be off, or um, just things that you might want to pay attention to. So we'll start right here, and this is one, they always have these questions and they ask a series of questions afterwards. And this is a good example of that one because of all the little details that are hidden in the story part. A group of students in Ohio conducted an investigation during the month of January to study the effects of solar warming. The students used a wooden box painted white. The box was mounted on a post in an open area, and a thermometer was fastened on each of the four sides. The box was oriented so that each thermometer faced squarely in a different direction, north, south, east, or west. The temperature on each thermometer was recorded in degrees Fahrenheit at 12 noon during 5 consecutive days of clear skies. The picture shows the apparatus used by the students. So we have a white box here, thermometer on each side. And remember, this box is painted white. The table shows the data collected by the students. So we've got, remember, we have 5 days in January of clear skies, right? So here's our north side. It looks pretty cold. South side, much, much warmer, right? In fact, the south is pretty much warmer than any of the other sides. East and west is pretty synonymous with each other, with a couple of degrees variation. So that's what you really notice right away, right? Is South Lake looks a lot warmer than the other sides. Okay, based on the data, which statement best summarizes the effects of solar warming in July? Solar warming at noon is greatest on south-facing surfaces. I'm gonna just go ahead and mark that because we know that's true. But let's keep reading so you could see how crazy these answers can get if you're not paying attention. Solar warming is greatest in January when the weather is clear. Solar warming in Ohio is greatest at the northern part of the state, or solar warming increases from the west side of Ohio to the east side of Ohio. So let's look at B. Solar warming is greatest in January when the weather is clear. We don't have any data for that. That's a kind of a crazy answer. We don't have any other months of the year or any other days, so we don't know. Solar warming in Ohio is greatest in the northern part of the state. Do you guys remember seeing anywhere up here where they actually mounted this box? No. Solar warming increases from the west side of Ohio to the east side. So the west, that it actually looks like, if anything, the opposite is true. But A is definitely the best answer for this. So here we have a short answer, and I kind of, we went over one on the last video of the formula you should always use for these. You get points just for restating the question. And restating the question is literally stealing the words from the question and dumping them down, and that creates your thesis statement so your reader knows what we're going to read. Also pay attention, this is 2 points, so we know that we should have 2 sentences at least. Okay, when designing the investigation, one student suggested painting the wooden box black. Predict how painting the box black would affect the temperature readings from the 4 thermometers. Explain your reasoning. Now, like I said in the last video, these questions can be really hard because you're suddenly asked to think outside of the box, and you're asked to think in an exploratory way. So they're not really giving you a lot of hints here. You're not looking at answers and choosing the right one. You're coming up with this all on your own. Of course, I've seen this question before, so I'm going to go ahead and just show you the formula. We're going to say painting the box black would affect the temperature readings from the 4 thermometers. I knew I was going to misspell that word. By, well, I'm going to say because the color black absorbs more thermal energy. Now remember, thermal energy is heat, but you probably guess like you wear lighter colors in the summer, right? Because it reflects the sunlight. In fact, we're going to say that lighter colors, such as the white box, reflect, we'll say thermal energy and absorb less. Okay, we're just going to say, sorry for my misspellings, guys. So really, I mean, that's good enough. That's 2 points. When you read the answer here, they basically use a lot of words that, you know, electromagnetic waves transfer to an object through absorption. We use the word absorb energy, increase the thermal energy of the object by increasing kinetic energy of its molecules. That answer to me is crazy. They do not need that much information, although if you can do that, that's fantastic. So here's a great question that we actually went over in the video, the first video with the science overview. If you have not watched that, please, please watch that. That information is critical. Each of those subject areas will be on the OGT, and you do need to understand that subject material. But we have gone over this one, but we're going to refresh your memory with it. A student is studying several species that belong to the plant kingdom. Which two are most closely related? Ficus benjamina and Ficus lyrata, Castilla elastica and Ficus elastica, Bromus japonicus and Hypomea violacea, Formaldia pandurata and Ficus pandurata. Now this is one, of course they don't expect you to know what any of these are. I don't know what any of these are. I assume they're plant. Well, they are plants. What are the most closely related? The answer is A. And even if you have no idea what these are, which I don't think any of us do, we have a way to think through the answers here, right? This is your garbage throwaway answer. Makes no sense, right? It's just a bunch of, there's nothing in common. Now notice B and D both have the same thing in common. So the classification systems they're using here, these can't both be right. What this is these guys are both in the not in the same, I think that's a family. I'm not sure what that is. I'm looking it up right now. It doesn't really matter. It's a genus. Oh, it's actually grass. Bromus is grass. These are not in the same genus, which they needed to be the same in order for them to be the most closely related. They cancel each other out because this last classification subfamily here, or whatever, does not, they're exactly the same. They can't both be right. So knowing nothing else, you can eliminate all of these and choose A. So here's a kinetic energy question. We went over potential kinetic energy and kinetic energy. And remember, kinetic energy is just the movement. But there's a mathematical equation behind it, and it deals with how much mass something has, and how far it's going, and how much gravity is going to work on it. So all carts shown below are identical 0.5 kilogram metal carts. Blocks placed on the carts have a mass of 1 kilogram each. Which cart arrangement has the greatest amount of gravitational potential energy, with the cart sitting at the top of the ramp as shown in each diagram? So we have A here, 2 blocks. This has no weight in it. Now remember, everything weighs the same, okay? 3 blocks, or it's on 3 blocks here, and 2 metal, what were they, metal blocks, whatever, here, and then 3 again, but 1, and then this one. So the most common answer I get here is, usually students will whittle it down between this, right? But you have to think about potential gravitational energy. the weight of something really massively affects the way that gravity works on it, right? So if you have this metal cart on three blocks, and then you have this one weighs heavier because you have an extra block in it, this one's going to go down faster, right? Because gravity is going to work on it harder. And this one is on three again, but we only have one block here. So it's going to be the gravitational potential energy is a little bit less. So the answer is actually B. So remember, if it weighs more and it's higher up, so gravity's going to work on it the hardest. So that's just kind of a thinking question. They usually have a few kinetic energy, usually like potential gravitational or potential kinetic energy questions. It's how high is it? How heavy is it? Okay, this is another thinking question. It's just kind of a waste of time. We're not going to look at that one. That one's crazy. Let's go over this one. Most bacteria reproduce asexually. Mammals reproduce sexually. Describe how these two methods of reproduction differ with respect to the genetic makeup of the offspring produced. Now, we haven't really talked about the differences between sexual and asexual reproduction, but I'm going to give you like a quick overview of how you can think about these. I don't think I really need to explain sexual reproduction. It's you have two parents, and you're introducing two sets of genetic makeup, right? You have the mother and the father, and we talked about chromosomes and alleles and how mixing the alleles of the father and the mother gives you different outcomes, right? You have greater variability, which when they come together makes a completely unique individual, right? Because you have two sets of genetic makeup combining into one person. Now, when you have asexual reproduction, I love showing this picture because, and we're looking at this one here, this is a bacteria. Literally, it just pinches itself off, and it's an identical reproduction of itself. There is no new genetic material introduced. It is just an exact replica. So, given that, what do you think the difference is between uh, would be to the respective genetic makeup on the offspring, right? So let's do our thesis statement. Um, let's see. The let's do asexual reproduction differs from sexual reproduction with respect to genetic makeup of the offspring produced because in asexual reproduction, no new genetic material is introduced. Well, you guys know that I mess up with my typing all the time, so this is just expected, right? Um, it's the content that matters, not the spelling, but the spelling does matter after the fact. So, okay, respect to the offspring produced in asexual, no genetic material is introduced. Asexual reproduction produces exact replicas of, we're going to just say, of itself. Sexual reproduction involves two sets of we could say unique, we'll just say, we're just going to say genetic material, and the offspring produced, uh, sorry guys, it does make me crazy when it's not spelled right, um, varies and creates a unique individual. Now on the test, you'll want to go back, and I'm sure that I can write this a little bit better, and you can edit it and cut words and make it sound a little bit better. But you guys get the picture. You want to make sure you do your thesis statement. You make a statement, you support that statement, make a statement, and support that statement. This is only a 2-point question, which I don't understand because it is a longer answer, but that's fine. So we went over this question about, this is tectonic plates. An oceanographer is traveling from the west toward the east on the Atlantic Ocean. She collects rock samples from the seafloor every 5 kilometers. The oceanographer stops when she determines that the rock samples are getting progressively younger as she moves towards the east. What conclusion is best supported by this data? She is traveling toward a mid-ocean ridge. She is traveling toward a deep ocean trench. She is traveling away from an underwater volcano, or she is traveling away from a hotspot in the crust. Do you remember our diagram of our underwater volcano? And I had that little scientist here. She's traveling, she's getting new rock because she's heading towards what? She's heading toward a mid-ocean ridge. That's new land development. Remember, deep ocean trends are very deep parts of the earth. Definitely no new land happening there. And this underwater volcano, she's actually traveling towards an underwater volcano, and she's actually traveling towards a hot spot in the crust where new tectonic activity would begin. Okay, the following diagram is found in an evolutionary biology textbook. So here, look at the information we have here. We have a time continuum. Now we don't have an increment in time here, but we do have what looks like a point of origin, and then we have species developing from that point of origin. And then you've got some sprouting here, and it looks like they end, and then this one sprouts and these end, but the life continues to go on and evolve from this point of origin. The branching tree diagram is most likely used to represent the theory that suggests a new species arise throughout time following rounds of mass extinction. We don't really see mass extinction happening here, do we? No, maybe little bouts of extinction. All species share a common ancestor and that change occurs throughout time. Probably. Speciation occurs very quickly with long periods of no change in between. We don't have enough evidence for that to be true. We don't even know how much time we have here. All species originated during the same period, and some have subsequently gone extinct. So the problem with that one is it's all species originated during the same period. We don't, that's not what this diagram's telling us. We have an origin of species here, or a common ancestor, and that change occurs throughout time. So while we're on this question, just something for you guys to think about. What kind of wave goes faster? What travels faster? Is it sound? Is it seismic wave, which is an earthquake wave? What other types of waves are there? Photon wave, which is light? Or anyway, the answer is photon. I can't even think of any other ones. I think that question, you might run across that. Remember, light is the fastest. Photons travel faster than anything else that we know of. So if you see that question, remember that. Light travels in air at approximately 3 times 10 to the 8th millisecond. When it enters a glass window, the speed is reduced to about 2 times 10 to the 8th millisecond. When the light re-enters the air, what will the speed of light be? So it's entered a glass, it looks like it's slowed down. What happens when it comes out? Does it stay the same at 2 times 10 to the 8th? Does it go up a little bit at 2.5 times 10 to the 8th? Does it go back to 3 times 10 to the 8th, or does it go even faster at 5? Well, it's C, okay? Like when light hits a window, it momentarily refracts, but when it comes out, it goes right back up to where it was. This is an interesting question to me because the first time I did this, I did not pay attention and I missed it, and I don't want you guys to miss it. So we're gonna look over this. A student has set up an artificial ecosystem for a class project. The ecosystem has producers, first level consumers, second level consumers, and third level consumers. By accident, a chemical enters the ecosystem and kills all the first level consumers. Which group of organisms will most likely survive? Well, for this question or any question like that, it's really good to visualize it, right? So we're going to put producers here. Now, producers are typically things that can make their own food. They don't need anything else to survive. So that includes some protozoa, but usually we're talking about plants here. So producers are plants, right? Because they use photosynthesis to make their own food. Okay, so we have them, and then we have this first level consumers who, whatever we're going to say eats plants, we can just say they're, for the sake of this experiment, these are beetles. And then you have the second level consumers, and that's whatever eats beetles. I don't know, birds eat beetles. And so these are the third, are our, well, these are our beetles, these are our birds, and then what eats birds? We're just going to say cats. It doesn't really matter. But by accident, a chemical enters the ecosystem, kills off all the first, so these guys are gone. These guys are all dead. Well, if these guys are dead, these guys and these guys no longer have a viable food source, right? So if these guys die, then all of these guys will die too, right? So what we have left are these producers. Now, when I first read this question eons ago, when I took the science test just for fun, I actually missed this. I missed that the producers were even part of the equation because I was focused on consumers. And that was a good example of make sure you read and understand what the question is. And for questions like this, it's good to just draw out a visual so you can see what's happening. This looks terrible, but you guys get it. So let me clear this. Okay, so which group of organisms will survive? This is the producers. These guys cannot live once the first level consumers are wiped out. Okay, we talked a little bit about astrophysics. They always have 1 or 2 astrophysics questions on the OGTs. An astronomer investigating a star determines that the light wavelengths she observes are longer than those expected to be emitted by the star. What can be concluded about the motion of the star relative to Earth's position? The star is moving closer to Earth. The star is moving away from Earth. The star is accelerating faster than Earth, or the star is accelerating at the same speed as Earth. I'm going to pull up a if you guys remember, a spectrograph here so that I can give you a visual, because they always do this question in one way or the other. So remember, if we see an astral body that's redshifted, it's moving away from us. That also means that the wavelengths are long, okay? And as we get to the blue end, they're shorter, right? So red is long shifted, it's moving away. We could also tell how fast they're moving away if they're red shifted, right? Blue shifted tend to have shorter wavelengths and they're moving towards us. All right, so with that said, let's go back. What can be concluded about the motion of the star relative to Earth's position? So what they mean is you have a telescope on Earth and you're looking at an astral body that has light, or that the wavelength has light wavelengths that are longer than those expected. Is the star moving closer to the Earth? Is it moving away from the Earth? It's accelerating faster than the Earth, or it's accelerating at the same speed of Earth? Well, there's your throwaway D. That makes 0 sense. Is it accelerating faster than the Earth? Not necessarily. Is it moving away from the Earth? Absolutely. Is it moving closer to the Earth? Absolutely not. It's red shifted, so it's moving away. Okay, we'll do one more of these just to get you in the practice of thinking. Like, I'm doing the thinking for you on these, but you really need to practice these short answers so you get your brain used to thinking about these and learning how to answer them, because when you come across them on the OGTs, you're going to feel stunted. You're going to feel like, oh my gosh, you're going to freak out. But the truth is, they don't care so much about what you write here as much as they care about, can you support it? Does it make sense? Okay, so don't panic about these. Remember just to think out of the box. You can be creative with them. This is a good example of that. This one's actually, we're going to generate 4 questions. So A teacher gives a student a non-toxic, odorless white powder to identify. Generate 4 questions, each regarding a different property of the unknown powder that could be safely tested and answered in a laboratory. So you're asking about chemical properties. There's a lot of ways you can test the property of an element. So one of the things is, one way I tell students to think about this question is, think about the difference between flour and sugar, right? What's denser? Well, flour's denser, right? The granules are smaller, they're dense, they're packed a little tighter. Sugar, the molecules are bigger, there's just a little more space in between them. So what is its density? What is the crystalline structure, right? And that's what I was just talking to you about. Like, what are the size of the crystals? You can definitely tell a lot the difference between flour, salt, and sugar, right? By their crystalline structure. What's another thing? What is the melting point? This is how scientists often like figure out a what an element is what's its melting point. Each chemical has a different melting point. And in tandem with that, what is the freezing point? How does it dissolve in water? How does it react with other chemicals? So as you can see, there's a lot of ways you can answer this question. You just need to get in the practice of thinking about them, and make sure when you're writing them down that it's just an idea or that makes sense and that you can support. Okay? So use the diagram below to answer the question. Cross-section of an area of Earth's crust. You have non-permeable rock. Non-permeable rock is rock that's not very porous. It's much more dense. Not much is going to get through that, right? And then you have permeable, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's very porous. There's cracks in it. There's movement. It's much more vulnerable to Earth's geological processes. And then we have a heat source here, and it's all pointing up right here. Looks like there might be some action happening here. And which area of the diagram above is a geyser most likely to form? So one thing I've noticed, a lot of people don't know what a geyser is. So a geyser is hot water that jets up through the Earth's crust. There's a few famous geysers. Old Faithful, is that the name of it? Being one of them, in Yellowstone. I don't think you guys have any in Ohio as far as I know, but the geysers are just hot water. And let's see if I can pull up a picture to show you guys so you can get kind of a visual of what these are. And once I show it to you, you'll be like, oh yeah, I've seen those before. And here you go. I think this one's Old Faithful here. And it predictably shoots up after a certain period of time. So they're pretty cool in person, and they're kind of cool to think about. But where do you think a geyser is going to form? Probably where all the arrows are pointing. You've got your heat source all looking at the same place, so it's going to be C. It has to break through this permeable rock. The water can't break through permeable rock. It's too hard. It's too solid. Okay, so permeable rock is where it's going to go. Now, we went over this, and I told you that there was one thing you really have to remember when you see these periodic symbols, this on the, yeah, you know what I'm saying. So the atomic number of carbon is 6, which means that carbon atoms always have, so we have 6. What does that mean? Do you guys remember? Is it ions, protons, neutrons, or valence electrons? It is protons. Please always remember that. They're gonna ask you about that, okay? It's 6 protons. Remember, it's also 6 electrons, but electrons are a little more fickle. Sometimes they jump, sometimes they share. So, but in general, that number is always gonna be the number of protons, though. Really important for you to remember that one. So this is a tectonic plate question. It's good. An earth science teacher places 4 pieces of carpet padding representing sedimentary layers between 2 large bookends as shown in figure 1. She then pushes the bookends towards each other, as shown in figure 2. So here we go, and then it's pushed up. Do you remember I talked about this? What geological process has the teacher demonstrating? Is this folding, faulting, convection, or divergence? So if you remember, I actually used this explicit example because I remember this is the way I think about it. You have the bookends, you push it together, and it folds, doesn't it? It looks folded. This is a tectonic activity called folding. It's exactly what it looks like. Remember, faulting is a displacement. You could think of faulting as like an earthquake where it's like moving stuff around and just changing position. But it's not this nice, pretty folding that like right here. And this is when the plates are pushing up against each other. So it creates hills and mountain ranges. And when you're looking at mountains or hills, I think about that. What's happening underneath? Are these plates are sliding, are pushing up against each other and creating kind of these cool geological landscapes. Remember, convection is, if you remember what that is, that's how heat moves through liquid. Remember that? And divergence is diverging, is moving apart from each other. The answer is folding. This is a great question and not an easy question. And for the longest time, I couldn't figure out why I was getting this wrong. And I figured that it was because I was reading the question wrong. And this is a good example of really paying attention to what you're reading. So the pedigree below shows an inheritance pattern of a recessive allele that results in a genetic disease. Based on the inheritance pattern, what are the possible genotypes for individual 6? Remember, a genotype is your gene, your DNA type, right? You can't see your genotype until it's expressed. Now, what do you think we need to do here? Probably a Punnett square. So we're going to draw a Punnett square. So we know what we're looking at, right? Now here's where I mess this up all the time. We're looking for the genotype for individual 6, all right? But we're gonna put this together. So we've got a parent here. These guys obviously have like a dominant gene each, right? Now we don't know if they have 2 dominants or 1 dominant, 1 recessive. So we're just going to guess that they have. For the sake of this question, it doesn't matter, and I'm going to show you why. So we're going to bring this down, a Z here, and then a Z here, so both dominants, and then a Z here, and then a dominant, or the recessive here, and then a dominant here, and then a recessive here, right? And then here you have 2 recessives. So this 2 recessives is where your genetic disease happens. So whoever is the lucky guy who has the 2 recessives is going to have the disease, which is individual 4. So individual 4, we know the genotype for individual 4 is the 2 recessives, okay? Now they're asking for the genotype of individual 6 right here, okay? So if individual 6 does not have the disease, we know that no matter what, his genotype cannot be 2 recessives, right? Because if he had 2 recessives, he would have the disease. So the only possible genotypes for him would be genotypes that have only the dominant gene in them. So you have, let's get rid of this real quick so I can show you. It has to be C, right? Because you have 2 dominants, or he can have a dominant and a recessive, because no matter what, the dominant will dominate. So if he has 2 recessives, he's going to come down with it. So we know that it can't be the 2 recessives. And then this one's just not enough, right? He could have one of those, but he could also have this one. So the answer is C. And remember, we're asking about individual 6. You ever come across that question? Make sure you read it all the way. Unlike I did not do that. So until like for a long time. But now I know why I kept missing that. And so the answer is C. Do you has to have a dominant allele no matter what. All of these have this possible genotype, right? Every one of these guys. The only one who has a different genotype is number 4, who has these recessive alleles. Okay, this is a great question because this is a good example of say whatever you want as long as you can support it. They don't really care. They just need you to know, they need to know that you know how to think about these and that you know how to write about them. So, in a recent agriculture experiment, farmers in Japan inserted fertilized watermelon blooms into square containers, which resulted in the fruit taking the shape of its container as it grew. Describe two benefits of farming practices that produce square watermelons. So, one benefit of farming practices that produce square watermelons. Did you guys see that? I didn't make one spelling mistake. That was pretty great. Is that the watermelons will not roll around when during transportation. What's another thing you guys can think of? Another, there's my misspell, benefit of farming practices that produce square watermelons is, so I'm obviously going to go ahead and tell you, but I really want you to stop and think about these before I give you the answers so that you can get in the practice of thinking about them. Is that you can cut, is that cutting them is easier and less messy, Adam. What else could we say here? You could say uh, by having the watermelons in a container, there's less pests that can get inside, right? You could also say they're going to be more expensive to grow for farmers. They're going to cost more because there's more material being used to grow them, right? There's a little bit more work involved. So they're probably going to be more expensive. I've had students say they're juicier, and I think that you could probably say that because they're ripening in the box and they're growing to their fullest potential, right? And they're actually growing to their fullest potential without being harmed by outside environments. So you can maybe say that. That's all I can think of right now. But literally, you could say whatever. Just support it. And this is a good. This is also a good example of how uh, inventors and scientists think. They're always thinking about how can we make something easier. And it could be something as basic as a watermelon. So it's kind of a cool thought experiment. Geneticists have determined that the majority of individuals on an isolated island population have blood type B. Type A blood is found to be more common in the mainland population from which the island was settled. How could the geneticists best explain the dominance of blood type B in the island population? Now, in our video, I did briefly go over this. I told you to look for keywords, right? So let's see if you guys can get it. I'll go over the answers. Random mutations have occurred in the island population. Genetic drift has reduced the frequency of type A individuals. Natural selection has only occurred in the mainland population, or environmental conditions on the island are less favorable for type B individuals. So remember, I said if there's words isolated, small population, I think we have, do we have small here? I don't know. Anyway, if we have the words isolated or small or removed population, it's always a genetic drift question. That's how evolution occurs over time, is smaller populations moving, reproduce. It's kind of like a little bit of inbreeding, right? There's not as much genetic material being introduced. So eventually certain chromosomes or certain alleles will be reproduced out of the population or just less dominant. So this is a genetic drift question. Remember, always isolated or small populations. That's your keyword, but it's a genetic drift question. Graphite and diamond are both forms of pure carbon. Graphite is soft and gray, while diamond is hard and transparent. The physical properties of graphite and diamond differ to the charge of their electrons, their average kinetic energy, the bond between their atoms, or the number of neutrons in their nuclei. Well, what can you throw out? Well, you can throw the charge of their electrons. The charge of electrons is always going to be negative. That's not going to change, right? Average kinetic energy, remember kinetic energy is just movement. That makes 0 sense. The number of neutrons in their nuclei, well, neutrons are neutral. They don't do a whole lot, but keep everything in together. It's actually the bonds between their atoms. The bonds between diamond are much, much more compact than the bonds of graphite, because graphite is a fairly malleable um, um, rock, right? Or whatever it is, because the bonds are looser. But you can't cut a diamond, can you? You cannot. They famously can cut just about everything else. So there's like a little diagram that explains it. The White Cliffs of Dover are made of a white sedimentary stone called chalk, which was formed when shells and skeletons of small marine organisms were deposited in a thick layer. An examination of the cliffs of Dover from top to bottom would show a change from, now what kind of question is this? You have a white cliff, you have layers, and it's asking you an examination from the top to bottom. This is a superposition question. And again, if you haven't watched the video, make sure you go over that. They're always going to ask these kind of questions. Is it younger fossils to older fossils? Now you're going from top to bottom. So here's the top, and you're going down. Simple fossils to complex fossils, igneous rock to sedimentary rock, or marine organisms to land organisms. Like I said, this is a superposition. It's definitely A. You've got your younger fossils, and it goes down to your older. While we're here, though, I do want to point out igneous rock. If I haven't pointed this out already, this is lava rock. This is what all land is theoretically made out of. You can remember what igneous rock is from the word ignite. Remember, because it's lava. So it's really molten. It's really lava that cools down into igneous rock. And then over time, igneous changes to other types of rock. Anyway, superposition question. Let's move on. Due to a loss of habitat, hunting, drought, disease, and inbreeding, the cheetah population has declined in number and is close to extinction. The current cheetah population has very little genetic variation, which is a result of the limited genetic variation in the current cheetah population compared to earlier cheetah populations with more variation. Current populations of cheetahs are more resistant to disease. The survival rate of young cheetahs is increased in current populations. Current populations of cheetahs are less likely to be able to adapt to environmental changes, or current populations of cheetahs are able to interbreed with other species, increasing genetic variation. Let's throw a D away right away, right? Like, we don't know anything about this. Throw that in the garbage. Current populations of cheetahs are more resistant to disease. Do you think if they have less genetic variation, they're more resistant? Probably the opposite is true. The survival rate of young cheetahs is increased in current populations. Does this anything up here support that? No, nothing supports that. Current populations of cheetahs are less likely to be able to adapt to environmental changes. Oh yeah, they don't have the genetic variation to withstand much change at all. So this is why they are an endangered species. Okay, guys, that's it for today. We'll do some more practice tests. I hope this is helpful. Make sure you're always taking notes, and you'll do great. And as you can see in these practice tests, what I really want you to pay attention to are how so much of the content is the same that they're asking. As we go through each of the practice tests, you'll see that kind of the same topics, and that's what you need to pay attention to. So I'm going to go ahead and end this today, and I hope to see you guys soon.